Okay, excellent. There we go. So I'm going to start talking to you. Great. So hi, everyone. I'm Simon Whelan. I'm a senior data scientist at Swedbank, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a view of how we're working with AI at Swedbank. So to kind of give you a bit of an overview of what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to start talking about what data science actually means at Swedbank. What does it? What do we actually mean by data science? How are we applying it to kind of different areas in the bank, and some of the ways of working that we might have associated with it. Then I'm going to go into a use case that we've recently completed on investment advice to kind of give you a bit more of an in-depth look at a piece of work, and give you a talk through of kind of how we've developed it, some of the challenges we face, and how we've actually been successful. And finally, then kind of broadening it back out again, talk about some of the lessons learned when we've been trying to do data science at Swedbank. Okay, so a bit of context about Swedbank. So Swedbank is a very large bank. If you kind of, we have 4 main markets in Sweden, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And as you can see here, it's, we have a very large number of private customers relative to those, relative to the population of those markets. So we're a very large leading bank in those markets. We also have a fairly large number of corporate customers as well, but our focus is primarily on private customers. This also means if you think about the kind of products we're offering products that look like savings accounts. We're offering products that look like credit cards. We're offering products that look like secured and unsecured loans. So things like a mortgage would be a massively important product for us. So a lot of our data science is going to be related to those products, but also over the processes of being a financial institution. So in terms of myself, as I said, I'm a senior data scientist. I work within the anti-financial crime department of Swedbank. And there are also several other data science teams dotted around as well. And as you can see on the map, I'm based in Stockholm, Sundbyberg in our headquarters. So when we start talking about data science at Swedbank, it's important that we kind of put it into some context. And that context is kind of epitomized by this bottom right-hand corner here. This is the passbook from our first ever customer, 3-year-old Carolina Hammerdal in 1820. So the bank has been going for over 200 years. We're a very large, very grounded institution. We have survived lots and lots of technological and knowledge revolutions. We've survived the Industrial Revolution. We've survived the digital revolution. But what this also means is that it's at all of these times we've looked at what the challenges are and tried to build on them for success. And now we're facing a new one with the data revolution and AI and how it might affect Swedbank. So we've identified usually around 3 areas within Swedbank where there are opportunities for using data science. The first, unsurprisingly, is understanding our customers. So retail analytics and marketing. How do we kind of draw in customers? How do we ensure customers get the products that they need? A second area we've kind of worked in quite a lot is helping authorities and society fight financial crime. So this is basically one of the kind of core components of a bank. We need to ensure that our customers are safe, protected against fraud, and all of the things you'd expect a bank to have in terms of compliance associated with it. And then finally, one of the other big opportunities of data science is improving banking processes. So as I said, we're an old bank. There's still a lot of paperwork. We're not digital native. So can we help the staff within the bank process those paperwork more efficiently? And one of the other great opportunities that we're meeting at the moment is we're migrating to cloud for our analytics. So it's literally this year, we're in the process of moving to Azure. And this is hugely exciting for us. It gives us the opportunity to kind of progress away from what I'm calling more traditional analytics. In other words, thinking about table transformations or models based just on tables to a full breadth of ML and AI type capabilities. And to kind of cover a little bit more detail about those of us working in data science at Swedbank, kind of this is what it feels like where I work. This is so in my department, I'm effectively have 2 phases. I have the part of the data science guild, and I'm part of the delivery team. The data science guild consists of around 30 data scientists and analysts, This is the place where we basically hang out and be our geeky selves. This is where we do our kind of talk about the tech side of things. This is where we ensure good processes for quality assurance and all of those kind of areas. This is also the place where we kind of organize our training and our knowledge sharing. So take, for example, if a use case has employed some new technique, which we'll see a little later, this is how we'd communicate it to the rest of the team that would be interested in it. The second place that I'm a member of is the delivery team. This is where we're actually kind of delivering the business value to the bank. So one delivery team contains data scientists. It also kind of contains members from the agile team, usually in the form of agile product owners, but perhaps a scrum master as well or something more. And also in some cases might include engineering. So if we're dealing with, say, for example, data ingestion or data acquisition, we might need some engineering support on that. Typically, within one delivery team, we work on several projects. So there might be, let's say, 7 or 8 of us working on 2 or 3 projects, and I myself might be, say, working on a couple of projects at a time, prioritizing differently sprint by sprint. So we can kind of, so everyone is kind of contributing to more than one thing, so they're interested, but we're never working alone at the same time as well. And each of these delivery teams also has a different target business area. So it might be one team is working very hard in, as I myself are, in kind of some of these optimization and enablement ideas. So what that means is how do we improve processes at Swedbank to make them more efficient? And a little bit more about the kind of personalities and mix of people we have. We have a wide range of backgrounds. We have people coming from kind of more hardcore mathematical statistics, all the way through kind of physics, all the way through biology, all the way to people that came from the bank from the ground up, worked their way up and are now experts both in kind of the analytics space, but also in actually understanding what Swedbank is and the data that we have and how we're going to use that in the team. We're very cosmopolitan. We have over 20 languages in the team, so it's kind of a fun place, lots and lots of different kind of viewpoints and ideas. We try and share our knowledge through regular hackathons. We've had meetups, and we also have quite a few Medium articles as well. So I urge you to check them out if you have the opportunity to do so. So having covered that, I'm going to dive into one of our use cases, investment advice. Now, as you can imagine, investment products are a very, very key product at Swedbank. We started off as a savings bank. So how we advise customers how to save and invest is very important to us. Typically, there are around 10,000 face-to-face meetings a month with customers seeking advice, or, well, not so much face-to-face these days, maybe video to video, but you get the point. There's a very large volume of these things happening on a regular basis. And there's been a strategic priority within the bank to ensure consistent, high-quality advice. So what that means is both improving the advice that we're giving to our customers. So that involves training up our investment advisors even more and ensuring that they are kept up to date with all the most modern products, but also kind of employing a set of checks to ensure that every meeting that's held actually reaches the criteria that we wish to have from those meetings. So if we kind of dive into that a little bit more in detail, before I say that, I should also say, well, okay, that sounds a very business problem. How are we going to use data science to solve this? So let's dive into that problem in a little bit more detail. Okay, so we've got a bit of an infographic type thing here. On the top left-hand corner, we've got some people coming into the bank. Then once they're in the bank, they're going to receive a meeting with an advisor, and they're going to talk through what their savings goals are, what they want to achieve out of putting money aside, and a whole host of other things you could imagine associated with this. Lots of information and dialogue back and forth. At the end of it, they're going to make some decisions about what they want to do, whether they're going to purchase products, change their portfolio, or whatever. That is then documented in a PDF and stored away somewhere. So we've got the kind of step from the meeting to a document that describes the meeting. And this is the document that would be used to check whether the meeting was compliant and met all the criteria. And that's this next arrow going down here. the checklist. Is everything right? For example, it's I'm aiming to save for my pension. Am I choosing the right kind of products to save for my pension? I'm aiming to save for a house deposit. Am I choosing the right products to be saving for a house deposit? Once we've got all of these, both the strengths and weaknesses are assessed by a kind of an independent group, and where feedback's necessary, the advisors are told what's happening here. Now, if you think about what data science is going to do here, you can imagine data science fitting in anywhere into this process. We could imagine it as the whole of the process, that we could actually replace all of this with kind of a digital solution where people come in, identify things from a set of drawdown menus and provide offering. That's not what we're doing here. We're adding into the business process of a face-to-face advice. So that's off the table. You could also see that data science could contribute to each one of these arrows, bringing people into the bank. That's market analytics. Helping shape the advice that an advisor gives. You could imagine that there's lots of scope there for people kind of giving what's the hottest fund at the moment. Transforming that advice into a document. Well, that's more of an IT problem, but you can see it's kind of a clear business process flow that's going on. Transforming that document into a checklist, well, that's a kind of clearly a data science problem as well. We need to kind of look through what's in that document and identify what's good and bad, and then collating those documents and feeding back are also areas where data science could contribute. So for this project from our data science team, we looked very much at evaluation. So as I said, it's roughly around 10,000 meetings. We need to assess these. This is currently a manual process. It's grueling. The checks range from ensuring that we have good information about date of birth, we have good information about names, social security numbers. It also then kind of goes to a much broader kind of questions of, as I was mentioning before, are your saving goal, are the products that you're purchasing in line with your saving goals? Are we compliant in that manner? And it's also very desirable in this evaluation stage that we keep it very even and consistent. We don't want it kind of temperamental that you could imagine could happen if you've got 100 people looking at these things. And a lot of value in terms of FTE hours here as well. This isn't just about saving FTEs. This is all about focusing FTEs hours on the more difficult questions to address. So if we're looking at moving this on again, we're kind of thinking, well, okay, we've identified part of the business problem. Now, how are we going to go about solving this? Because there's a lot of kind of competing interests here. We've got different business areas. We've got people that are directly working with the advisors or the advisors themselves. We've got IT infrastructure. We've got the business leadership. They all have different needs here. And what we need to do is carefully come together and consult to create the simplest solution that we can and develop a meaningful MVP. So just to kind of pull that out a little bit, it's kind of, you can imagine the business leadership saying, we need this fast. This is a pressing business concern. We want to address this problem immediately, please. You can think of the data scientist saying, there's a document. Wonderful, I'm going to go and do some all that cool NLP stuff I've been learning about. Lots of ideas how to do this. Doesn't necessarily go very fast. Then we can imagine the business side saying, well, actually, we've got 10 checks at the moment that are done manually. Now we're doing it with AI. AI is clearly better than humans. We can add 10 more checks of increasing complexity. And then finally, we might have, say, infrastructure saying, this is a nice project, but we have other priorities right now. You need to kind of adjust your aim and scope to meet what we can offer you. And then just to kind of throw in another level of complexity on all of this is many of the compliance and process level challenges we face here. So these documents outline people in very important information about people. It includes obviously personal identifiable information, their name, their social security number. We want to share that with as few eyes as possible. There's also very personal information about their income, their savings, and a whole host of other kind of things you could imagine that you just don't want to. You want to limit the number of people that see that information. So what we need is often quite creative and flexible technical solutions for dealing with this. So this is the technical solution that we ended up coming up with in a kind of broad brush terms. So we've got a document, and the tech team that we're working with is the robotic process automation team. So they basically have automated robots that can pull in these files, do some of the more basic checks themselves. So if you think kind of simple regex, is there a date of birth, yes or no? Robotic process automation can handle those checks. In some cases, there's more complicated checks that require some processing of free text. This is where AI needs to come in. So what we have is a cloud solution. The robot pulls out small segments of the text that are relevant for solving this particular checkpoint. At the same time, we also, if you can see here, in between our lorem ipsum, we've got little tokens that demonstrate that we're moving everything that looks like a social security number, everything that looks like a bank account, all that PII, all that kind of sensitive data is being removed before we even get to the kind of AI solution. Then the AI solution was along in the background, processing each check in turn, depending on the data that's passed back, and passed back to the robot. And in terms of kind of the more technical side of things, this is set up as an API call, essentially. So it's kind of a nice and simple interaction with the robot that can work. So we've now got a situation, we've built a solution that pulls in raw PDF documents, robot does its processing, passes off the stuff it can't do, calls the AI solution, results in a checklist that can then go back into the kind of the rest of the manual process that we currently are using. I mentioned this is kind of we've taken a cloud-first strategy in the bank as well, and this is cloud-first in several senses. This is our first use case that is fully Azure from conception all the way to completion. And it's been a fun use case to work on. We've had a cross-functional team of both data scientists and cloud experts and engineers working together really, really tightly. And that's been fantastic because it's basically meant there's no dependencies. If we run into some policy issues on cloud, we can talk to the people that are responsible for those policy issues immediately in our daily meetings. It's also given us an opportunity to build lots of really cool and exciting things. We've got full CI/CD pipeline. So when we're saying that, kind of you're thinking DevOps and DevSecOps here. We've got infrastructure as code, so tear down, put up, whatever we're using. We can build in tests, and we can be very clever about those tests and make sure those unit tests actually represent what the business wants. So if we have a set of criteria from the business of what a checkpoint needs to be, they can go in to our dashboard and say, yeah, that checkpoint is met in that piece of code. That's okay to go. And finally, this is a solution that's built by data scientists for data scientists in terms of these pipelines and setup. So we're hoping that we can take this, use it in other use cases of a kind of a similar API-ish nature, integrating with a robot. Okay, so that's been the kind of a bit of detail. Let's pull things out a little bit and talk about, well, okay, there's a lot of data science going on at Swedbank. We've had our successes and we've had our slightly less successes. What are some of the pitfalls that arrive? What are some of the success? How do we tell what's going to work and not work? I should also stress here that we're kind of talking a whole scope of a whole range of types of complexity here. Everything from simple rule-based models through kind of logistic or linear regression up to kind of deep learning type methods. So we've tried a whole scope. The one most critical learning that you can take is kind of the obvious one, but it's one that's sometimes easy to miss. Business value. I spent a lot of time talking about less about what we're doing technically, but more about how we're integrating what we want to do technically into an existing business process. You have to know what you need really, really clearly. So when you start developing a project and looking at questions, you have a very strong idea of where that solution is going to fit into the business process, whether it's likely to meet the end goals that you need. And even once you've got that kind of clearly laid out, it needs to be reiterated over and over again, both from the business side and the data science side. We need to talk to each other constantly to make sure that, yeah, okay, we're still aligned, this is still working well. The solution that you've got kind of half up and running, this is working in the area that we need it to work. And finally, and something that's sometimes a little bit overlooked, is the solution explainable? We're working in a bank, and explaining outcomes is very, very important. So take, for example, the investment advice. If someone fails one of the checks, we need to explain why they've failed that check. It needs to be extremely explicit. So if we kind of look at some of the difficulties and pitfalls that we've seen, one major one is data quality. I think this is true everywhere. I've worked, be it in kind of academic research, be it in manufacturing, be it in a financial institution. Don't make assumptions about data. There are nulls where you don't expect them. Errors get made putting in data. You have to be able to cope with them. So just because a column in a table says it's this, make sure you go and check or talk to people that know and have experience. Second pitfall that occurs is exciting research style projects. Now, what I mean by this is more kind of, well, what kind of technical approaches do we take to a problem? And research style implies that, well, we're going to start complex and build this amazing thing and get the best performance we absolutely can at the beginning. That's all very nice, but it's often really hard to scale those, often hard to productionize it. Almost always far easier, far better to start with the simplest solution and, if required, move to something more complicated. We see success doing that. It's much harder to go the other way. Finally, when we're kind of going, we've looked at some data, we've kind of got a very good idea of what our solution is going to look like. Taking that from kind of a discovery phase into production or deployment and development, it's as much a software engineering process as it is a data science process, so ML engineering. You want to automate everything. You want to test everything. You need to make sure that when people are writing code, it's reviewed and that your pull requests actually mean something when something is approved. So you need to make sure all the data scientists who come from all these amazing disciplines of highly technical, often scientific mathematical areas are on board with having to do the kind of the hard work in the kind of software engineering side of things as well. So moving on to what successes might look like. Well, the first one is the business problem. As I say, identifying that business problem, but phrasing it sharply, really defining it neatly and cleanly. So it isn't the business telling the data scientist what to do and the data scientist walking away and scratching their head saying, well, what do they mean by that? And it isn't the data scientist say, we're going to build this super complicated model, and the business stakeholder goes, that sounds wonderful, don't know what you mean, but it must be AI, it's fantastic. It means that there's enough dialogue there, that we have a business problem, everyone understands how we're going to go about solving it, and everyone can get on board with that. The baseline products is kind of the more kind of project management side of the technical solution. Make sure that we don't promise too much too soon. It's really narrowed down on what that business problem is. What is the minimal version? What's the kind of held together of bits of string version that we can put into semi-production and check that it's going to add the value you believe it's going to add as a business stakeholder. Once we've got that, great, improvements can be added later, but get to that point as quickly as possible. And then finally, tight collaboration, both within the kind of technical teams, so engineering, data scientists, cloud center of excellence, but also within the kind of business teams as well. So what you're trying to do is make sure one team can take a project as far as possible without having handovers, which kind of usually they can result in confusion. It's difficult to hand over an entire project to a different individual. So at that point, I'd like to say thank you for listening, and I'll have a look and see if there are any questions there. So hi Simon, can you share some insights on how did you measure success of AI adoption in investment advice initiative, key KPIs? Okay, yeah, sure. So we have there's kind of two axes here. One is that there's going to be a series of checkpoints that we need to measure. We already know the outcomes of many of those from human intervention already, so we can kind of compare the AI solution to the human outputs. Now, that isn't strict accuracy because both humans and AI make mistakes. We're both aiming towards some kind of non-visible goal, but you want high consistency there. A second one is coverage of documents. Now, investment advice covers a wide range of different types of problem. So you could imagine that some people come in, I've got a small amount of money that I want to be putting into my pension. That's going to result in a very, very similar piece of advice, no matter where you are in the country, no matter which advisor you come to. So they're relatively simple cases. The AI solution will cover those very well. Sometimes that advice gets very complicated. And part of the AI solution is actually also identifying cases where that is complicated, so a human goes and deals with it. We can deal with some free text, but we can't deal with all free text relating to advice. So what we're aiming to do is basically ensure that we're very accurately capturing the simple cases and that the cases the humans are getting are the ones that matter. I hope that's answered your question. I also realized there's a slight delay on the broadcast. So if anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to post them. I see Ritesh is saying hello as well, an ex-colleague of mine at Sandeep. Hi, Ritesh. And you're very welcome, Kapil. So I'm not seeing any more questions. Great, thank you, Ivana, and thank you everyone for listening. I hope you found it insightful into the kind of things we're doing at Swedbank and how we're changing things with AI. Great, thank you everybody.